Wargaming tactics, fundamental wargaming tactics, regardless of the system that you play. There are certain aspects, there's certain kind of mechanics, decision trees, AI, DNA in wargaming that this is where we want to start. And in life, I have a buddy that essentially everything in his life is determined by the 80-20 rule. And we were talking about this kind of joking, and I thought, well, that kind of holds true for wargaming. So can we apply this idea, 80-20, the bulk of your army, the most of your army, against a minimized amount of your opponent's army? So you're going to look at your gaming system, and you're going to try and figure out how you're going to do this. So we have a gaming table, a wargaming table, and maybe it's a big traditional gaming table with trees and buildings because we're playing historicals. Maybe it's BattleTech with a hex map. However it's going to be set up. In most cases, you are limited by the physical boundaries of the gaming table. You know, X-Wing miniatures, you fly off the map, you're off the map on there. In BattleTech, you go up against the corner of the map, you can't pull off the map unless you force withdraw, then you're out of the game. Now, in certain games, there are some sub-rules where maybe you could leave or teleport on or go into reserves, but for the most part, the map is the map, the physical boundaries. And that's, before we strip off, let's strip off any type of terrain. So if you're thinking about a game that you played the other day, just like pull the terrain off, physically, the size of the map. So what we want to do through our units, and this is true even for a skirmish game, you know, something like we've been playing kill teams in 40K. My Cornate Warband is just dominating. It's actually done so well. A lot of the members in my warband, they've got a lot of bling, they've got a lot of gear on there, and I'm a little bit worried because, you know, you lose members of your warband, they're going to be irreplaceable. It's almost like I'm too powerful for my own good, and when they swing against me, that's going to be hard. And I find myself being very cautious with my warband, and Khorne does not care about caution. He wants you to get up there, bolt pistol, chainsword, plasma pistols, and shock mauls, and just get that glory. But that aside, a big game, you know, playing Chain of Command, World War II, playing a Warhammer 40,000 game, as you move your miniatures, as you move your elements, your units, whatever we want to call them on the table, physically, not everything is going to be able to get into the action, whether it's a close combat assault game or a shooting game. The units in the back are literally going to be somewhat blocked by the units in the front. And again, modified a little bit, like maybe you can shoot over your units or there's penalties. But you're never going to be able to get all of your army effectively shooting at one target at the same time. But what we want to do is keep the bulk of our army together. To keep the bulk of our army together. So this way, the threat bubble, and I define a threat bubble. Let's take, let's talk BattleTech here. I put a mech down on the table. I put my longbow down on the table. The threat bubble, if I count out the hexes for the longest range of the missiles, so we count out, the 20 plus hexes out there. And then if I run, that'll add, depending on the mech, another 4 to 6 hexes. So let's say 26 hexes on there. That means 360-degree radius. If we imagine that bubble, that's the threat bubble. Anything that comes in, that walks in, or runs in, or appears in, or flies in to that imaginary threat bubble, I can shoot at. I can shoot at it. Whether I'm going to hit depends on range, depends on modifiers, but you can be threatened by my dice. If you're outside of it, you're safe. You want to have as many of your units on the table. And again, it's going to be limited by the size of the table and just how big your army is, where the threat bubbles physically overlap. So if a unit walks in, you're like longbow missiles, long-range missile carrier missiles, LRM carrier missiles, Thunderbolt, T-Bolt long-range missiles on there, Marauder, PPCs, whatever the gaming system, and just flood that. So you want to make sure that 80% of your army can overlap. Now on the 20% side, based on the terrain, based on the mission, based on the things you can influence, you want your opponent, you want to engage your opponent's army piece by piece. So I don't want to take the bulk of my army, unless I'm playing DBA and I've got my Romans lined up and you've got your toys lined up and we go head to head and we smash in, kind of the classic Warhammer Fantasy back in the day. It looks epic, but I'd rather have most of my army there and maybe the tip of your army or pieces. Think about how you can divide up your opponent's army into pieces so that 80% of your army is shooting at 20% of their army. If you shoot at their entire army, your shots are going to be dispersed. Okay, you kill a couple of units here, Battletech, you damage a mech here, but what have you really reduced? The number one rule in Wargaming, pick a unit, pick an element on the table, blast it off the table, removed, off the table, back in your box, sorry about that. Then move on to the next unit. And sometimes you can influence that by having a unit, other times it's what your opponent gives you. So I want to shoot all my threat bubble onto a single unit and eliminate it. I just want to drown it in dice on there. How do we do that? One way we might do that is based on the mission your opponent's going to be moving somewhere for something. Often there'll be key terrain pieces to find, maybe some elevation that'll allow you to spot for indirect fire, or a fortification that if I can hold this early on, I might have an advantage, or I want to get this forest over on the right in case things go bad. It's a fallback point. Sometimes players will send pieces of their army off somewhere to do something. While you're navigating the mission specifics, if you can get into a place where your army can gobble up those little pieces on there, that's key. That's massive. So how can you look based on the configuration of the table, keep 80% of your army leveraging, pushing forward that threat bubble against the 20%, the smaller pieces of your opponent's army, and slowly gobble them up, and gobble them up.